the last time some of the more prominent college football programs around the country won national championships. The year 1986, Cameo doing it big with Word Up and that one right there, Candy. The Penn State Nittany Lions, last time Penn State won a national championship. That's right, 1986. I bet Chase Goodbread remembers that one pretty well. What about it, Chase? Penn State, 1986, upsetting the Miami Hurricanes in the Fiesta Bowl. Vinny Testaverde at quarterback for Miami in 86.
Did Vinny look worse in that game than Geno did in 92?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I want to say, did Vinny have Vinny had like 4 picks, I want to say, in that loss.
Deer in headlights, both of them.
It's at Penn State. Yeah, instead of Vinny and the Jets, it was Vinny and the picks for Miami. You look at that Miami roster from 1986, Chase. You had Benny Blades at free safety. You had Jerome, speaking of Benny's, you had Jerome Brown, the late, great Jerome Brown, at defensive tackle. You had Alonzo Highsmith was your fullback on that team. How about Michael Irvin at wide receiver? Other guys, George Myra Jr. was your starting middle linebacker. Winston Moss was an outside linebacker on that team. Daniel Stubbs, another guy that left us far too soon, was a defensive end for that Miami defense. And then, of course, Vinny at quarterback. That was the Fiesta Bowl, if memory serves me correctly, Chase, that the Miami team showed up in fatigues upon arrival there at the airport. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was a statement coming off that airplane, right?
That's when Miami officially sort of went renegade, right, as a program, when they showed up in the fatigues in advance of that Penn State national championship game. And kind of a Penn State team that year, Chase, that kind of quietly worked through the schedule. And Alabama fans didn't think it was too quiet when Penn State came to Tuscaloosa and dropped a little 23-3 bomb on the Crimson Tide. That 86 Alabama team, Chase, I'll contend, outside of the Nick Saban era, one of the more talented teams probably in the existence of Alabama football. Cornelius Bennett, Bobby Humphrey, obviously at running back, Mike Shula in his senior year as the quarterback. That team got off to a really good start of the 1986 season. Didn't have much of a finish, unfortunately. We're just getting underway over in Hoover with SEC Media Days yesterday and then into today. And Chase, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is this lineup of quarterbacks at SEC Media Days. And I want the Chase Goodbread ranking for those 9 quarterbacks that we're going to have pass through Hoover in the coming days. We had a couple yesterday, and we've got 4 more today. So how about it, Chase? Let's go through these quarterbacks and kind of get your ranking 9-1. Give us kind of the guy at the bottom of that heap right now. Is it Matt Corral? Is it maybe Kelly Bryant? Who do you got in that 9 spot?
I'm gonna put Corral there for now. We'll go ahead and do it in reverse order. I found this to be a pretty easy exercise at the top and at the bottom, and tougher in the middle. But yeah, Corral, I guess, will bring up the rear for me at 9. And then moving up from there, I'm looking at Felipe Franks. Never have been a big fan of his. Jarrett Garantano from Tennessee. Joe Burrow at LSU, I've gotten lower than I'm sure most. Anyone who listens to our fall podcast probably knows I'm not the biggest Burrow fan in the world. Followed by Jake Bentley, then Bryant, Kellen Mond, Jake Fromm, and Tua Tagovailoa topping the list there. Probably got Burrow lower than most. Probably got Kelly Bryant higher than most.
Yeah, what do you not see in Joe Burrow that has him sort of down the list for you on this list of SEC Media Day quarterbacks?
For me, he's a game manager, but he's not a playmaker. And that's what LSU's got to have. That's what LSU never has at quarterback, seemingly. And for me, anyway, Burrow's just the next guy taking snaps at LSU. So, it's been a while since they've had somebody who you really thought was dynamite at that position. I don't know if you want to go back to Jamarcus Russell or what, but it's been a bit of an issue there.
Yeah, and LSU though seems to be positioning in its own mind anyway. Joe Burrow is a legit all-conference type candidate. I won't go as far as to say a Heisman candidate because I think that's pretty laughable at this point. But it seems like one of those situations, Chase, where the program and Ed Orgeron too maybe holds Joe in a little higher esteem than everyone else around college football.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, maybe he comes out this year guns blazing and proves everybody wrong. But last year in his first year as a starter, and coming off, of course, he transferred in, but he didn't knock my socks, and I didn't think he was terrible. But he didn't knock my socks off by any stretch. I thought the hype was a little high coming in, and I think it's a little high coming into this year once again.
I'll tell you what you got to like about Joe Burrow that you saw last year is the dude could take a beating. He was sacked 5 times by Alabama in that shutout loss to the Crimson Tide in Baton Rouge last November. And then yesterday, Chase, we hear Ed Orgeron talk about running Joe Burrow a good bit more in 2019. What sort of comes to mind when you hear Ed Orgeron say that about his starting quarterback? And I guess just as importantly, do you buy it? Do you really think Ed Orgeron's going to expose this guy to even more hits than we saw him take a year ago?
No, I don't. I think that sounds like a little bit of lip service to me, but who knows? Maybe they'll try to do that. I didn't think they were as dynamic at running back last year with Brissett as they usually are. So if you want to say they maybe should have used Burrow a little bit more on keeper type stuff and design quarterback runs last year and maybe get a little bit more mileage out of the running game that way, I can agree with that. But if the LSU backs have a little bit more of a spark this year than last year, it's hard for me to imagine them doing anything but protecting Burrow as best they can.
Yeah, you would think so, because my first reaction to hearing say that was, is Miles Brennan still your top guy off the bench? I mean, is that what we're talking about here? If you're going to do this with Joe Burrow, and I agree with what you said about the running back position. Last year they were not Geis-like, the Tigers weren't. They were not Fournette-like at the position. So if it does play out the way that talked about yesterday, I got to think it's because they're not getting the production LSU isn't from that running back position for a second straight season, which could certainly be problematic, because as we saw in the Alabama game, if you can't get something out of your run game, and Burrow, while athletic enough, not Michael Vick by any means, we know that, not Jalen Hurts, you're going to know where to find that guy on 3rd and 8, and that's the benefit Alabama had in last year's meeting, no doubt about it. What about Jake Fromm, Chase? I talked about it earlier in the show. Do you think this will be, the last time we see Jake Fromm at SEC Media Days, or do you think there's a good chance that we'll see him in advance of the 2020 season in a year from now?
I tend to think this is probably the last we'll see of Jake Fromm. I think he's a remarkable quarterback. Although it's interesting we transitioned from LSU to Fromm, because the one time in Fromm's career where he's looked completely lost and shell-shocked was when he went to Baton Rouge last year. Mm-hmm. You throw that game out, and you'll be really hard-pressed to find any game on his resume thus far where he hadn't been cool as a cucumber in the pocket and making pretty much all the right decisions. So I think he's a heck of a player, and I think there's a heck of a talented kid that he ran off to Washington. I mean, sometimes people forget how Georgia thought the quarterback position was going to play out a couple of years ago, and Fromm wasn't even in the photo, and now he's face of the program.
See, I think that Fromm, I'm going with Fromm being there next year, Chase. I think he's going to Peyton Manning it up. I think he's going to Tim Tebow it up. And I think he's going to come back one more year for Old State U, Chase, for Old State U.
Georgia fans would go bananas if that happens. So they'll hold Fromm in extremely high esteem if he comes back. But we'll see. I think he's pretty special. I would imagine that he's going to have a lot of people in his ear this coming winter, tell him to do just the opposite. But we'll see.
Yeah, and the thing is, I guess if he does come back for a final year, he could get Trevor Lawrence, right, in that 2021 draft.
Yeah, hadn't thought of that. Now, the way NFL clubs pick quarterbacks in the first round, that's not the worst thing in the world because you can get Trevor Lawrence and still be a top 10 guy.
Look at Daniel Jones. Yeah.
Sure. So, Daniel Jones is a great example. There's no position that gets overdrafted early in the draft like quarterbacks. There's no question about that. So, he's got that going for him anyway. But you're right. Trevor Lawrence is going to probably own things when it's his time.
Now, Chase, I understand you made another trip to Chicago, to the north side of Chicago, to visit Wrigley Field. Give us some of the highlights from this most recent visit to the Museum of Baseball, as it were, up there in Chicago.
Yeah, stayed directly across the street from Wrigley at a place called the Hotel Zachary, which was really nice to be able to literally just pretty much walk out of the hotel, walk across the street, and you're at the ballpark. So that was not a cheap venture for sure, but it definitely had all the convenience you'd want. Managed to get a little bit of Chicago-style pizza in there, and the Cubs were 2-0 Saturday and Sunday with us there. My family's been taking trips there for a while, and for whatever reason, the Cubs almost never seem to lose when we make this summer run up there to Wrigley. It's a lot of fun for sure. Saw a lot of offense. The Cubs had, I think, 26, maybe 27 hits over 2 days, and quite a few of them left the yard.
Yeah, never a bad time. We've made that trip together in recent years, and man, the weather, as much as anything, can provide a really nice break from the southeast when you're able to get up there on the banks of the Lake Michigan area there. So always a lot of fun. Now, the deep dish Chicago style pizza, are you a fan of that? Of that casserole? That's not pizza, Goodbread. That's a casserole.
I like it just fine. You're a thin crust guy.
Oh, it's the only kind of pizza. Didn't you know that, Chase? Come on.
Nah,
that stuff in Chicago, that's a casserole. That might as well be a lasagna or something,
Yeah, you're right. It's a little on the heavy side. Yeah. No question, but I can get into it. I like it just fine. It's went to Lou Malnati's, I think, is where we ended up going, and they that cheese will string out as long as your arm when you lift that slice out of that pan.
Hey, so give us a Big Green egg update while we're at it. We've talked to Chase in the past. I mean, he's wizard-like with that Big Green egg of his. Anything new that you've ventured into? You're creative with that Big Green egg of yours.
The latest toy there is a flat top that I picked up where you can kind of circular thing where you can basically just put it on top of your grate and it'll cook on a flat iron surface, kind of like at a Japanese restaurant. So you can throw shrimp on there and you don't have to worry about shrimp falling through the grate or whatever, or sticking to the grate. And spray a little oil on there and fire it up, and the next thing you know, it's like you're eating at Hokkaido or something. It's not bad.
Yeah. Do you have the holster with all the different knives in it while you do this? And can you flip? Can you make perfect tosses of shrimp tails into the awaiting mouths of your diners there? Have you reached that point?
Never gonna get there. I can't do the egg trick. I can't make the onion smoke like a choo-choo train or none of that.
You can't do the train trick?
I can't do. I just fire up that shrimp, and as long as there's thumbs up around the table, that's all I care about.
Talking with Chase Goodbread of NFL.com, Crimson Cover Television, and the Talkin Tide podcast on Southern Fried Sports, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier. Now, you're headed to Hoover, I take it, in the next day or so. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm headed there tomorrow and Thursday to pick up a few scraps of info for some stories we're working on at NFL.com. Nothing I need to be there for on Monday or Tuesday, and it can be such an exhausting week if you got to be there for the entirety of it. I'm kind of glad I can get in and out in 2 days.
You don't miss it, Chase? You don't miss the 4-day marathon as a beat reporter for an SEC team? You're kidding me, Chase.
Missed it altogether when it was in Atlanta last year, and felt like a big sigh of relief just flipping on the TV.
Going to be back in Atlanta next year, followed by Nashville in 2021. I wanted to get your thoughts on Nashville in particular, because you were there in April for those huge crowds that came with that NFL draft up in the Music City. What will be your sort of expectation for SEC Media Days in Nashville after sort of experiencing what you did with the NFL draft? Do you think the dynamics are going to be different having done both? Will it translate, I guess? That's obviously what Greg Sankey and the SEC are going for with this thing.
I guess my question is, since Vanderbilt fans are so used to leaving at halftime, are they going to walk out in the middle of it?
Oh, my goodness.
That'd be my question.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I think I've said it before, said it as recent, I think, as yesterday. Atlanta, there's too much going on there for the SEC Media Days to really become a spectacle in the ATL. But I do think Nashville hasn't reached that point yet, and it's enough of a melting pot of SEC fan bases that you could get a variety of different fans there on a daily basis.
That's what they need. That's what they need. They don't want it. They don't want it to be a situation where the Vandy contingent's got to carry the excitement.
No. I think Jacksonville, our hometown, could be similar that way. I don't think people realize that about Jacksonville, is that there are a ton of different fan bases represented there in Northeast Florida. So it'll be interesting. I think it'll be far more celebrated and received in a positive way in Nashville than Atlanta. But, Hoover's pretty much home, as we know, for SEC Media Days. Well, Chase, we'll let you get back to preparation for the next couple of days over in Hoover. Always appreciate you joining us here on the program. Chase Goodbread of NFL.com, Crimson Cover Television, and also the Talkin Tide podcast. Thanks, Chase.
All right, see you.